What is the biggest disappointment you've ever had in your life, and how have you dealt with it?
My biggest disappointment was that I spent a decade in radio being lousy. Like where I just wasn't that good at it. But it seemed like I could get good at it, but I wasn't that good at it. And I think like a lot of us who want to make creative work, like we've got good taste, right? Like that's why we want to do creative work. Like you have stuff you really love and stuff you think is lousy. Like you've got taste. Like you have an impulse, right? You can tell good from bad. And then when you look at your own work, you can tell that it's still bad. And I was in that state. And I feel like there should be a name for that, because like every single person goes through it and no one ever talks about it. Where you know what good is, you know what you're shooting for, and you also know that like you're not there. And I feel like nobody ever talks about this, and I feel like it's a huge thing. And most of the people who I know who do like creative work, like they went through this for a while. And me, I think longer than most. And it was like it took so long. I just had to do like story after story after story, and many of them bad.
The word for it is painful.
Painful, yeah, it was very painful. Yeah, and I just feel like you gotta kind of stick through it, and then you gotta kind of get like if the stuff that you really love, you should just get nearer to it. Like you basically just should find people to work with who you admire, and just to work for free and get a temp typing job on the side. And like everybody who has a job that's any good that I know at some point worked for free for a couple years and made their money somewhere else, waitressed or
What is your first priority when you're making a show? Are you a writer, like a journalist, or are you trying to entertain?
That's a very good question, and I actually have an answer to this one. And the answer is, I think what our show represents, the way in which we're different than a lot of shows, is that it's journalism. It's hardcore journalism. We're applying the tools of journalism to everyday life, to people's like everyday lives, right? So it's just it's actual documentary journalism. However, generally when people do that, it's really, really boring. And our mission is to just say, like, you can do this thing, which is documentary, and which is like, trying to get people's voices out there that wouldn't get out there anyway else, just like your magazine, and like stories that wouldn't get out there anyway else. But it doesn't have to be boring. It can be really fun. It can be really funny and fun and engaging. And like we want the stories to be like these little movies for radio. And if you hear the first minute of it, you can't help but stay to the next minute. And like I think with public broadcasting, I think pretty much anybody who's heard it just has this feeling of like, if you hear a usual minute of it, there's a feeling of like it's like medicine. It's like, yes, maybe this will be good for me, but I'm not sure I can sit through it.
Yes.
And we feel like, okay, public radio has been around for years and years and years, and it's time for it to be more than that. And it should actually be like doing all the high-minded things of like, getting the stories out, getting news and all that, and also like be as entertaining as anything that's out there, and so it's really fun. So like I don't think you should have to choose. I think that like that's what we're trying to do, is put ourselves into a position where we're not choosing between seriousness and entertainment. Like we are unashamedly about show business. Like show business isn't bad. Like we're in show business, we're putting on a show, and we want people to listen. Like one of the things we know about the ratings for our show is that every week 1.5 million people listen to the show. And the average time listening is 48 minutes, which means that and that includes the people, like if you picture it's an hour-long show, 59-minute show. So if you picture you've got an hour, well, some of the people come in halfway through and 3/4 of the way through, and so when they get averaged in with the people who started at the beginning, what it means is that basically if someone turns on at any point during the hour, they stay with us through the end. And the reason why is because we are trying to make it as fun as we can possibly make it, that they wouldn't turn away. So I feel like that's the next frontier, is to do it.
Attention do you pay to both the positive and negative opinions of the public on your work?
I pay attention. Like when people email us and write us and hate our guts, we notice. And sometimes I'll be at the office and someone will write something that just makes me so mad, and I'll take a half an hour and write them back because they're making me so mad because I think they completely misunderstand. Generally, the people who hear the show are liking the show, so we haven't had huge problems. We've gotten into, the main people who we've gotten into trouble with are animal rights people, weirdly. Like a couple of years ago, we did a story. It was a fictional story. It was a made-up story about where at one point there are these two brothers, and one of them takes an armadillo and dunks it in water. And animal rights people, in droves, wrote to us saying, how can you do that? It's made up. It's not real. It's make-believe. It's pretend.
Are you ever tempted to add your own personal opinion to the stories that you do? Or?
Yes, not only am I tempted, but I add it. I feel like part part of a certain style of journalism is that you don't want to be like a news robot, like pretending that you're above it all and standing outside it. Like if something is surprising or something is moving or something's funny, like the people who are on our show, and me included, like we make clear, like, you know, we this is how we feel about it. And also, you know, I don't know, like you can tell from the stories that the people who are making the stories are really interested in the people in the stories. Like, I don't know, you can tell like there's a lot of feeling happening. I think that makes things more interesting. Like, and I feel like it's just as fair as other journalism. Like, I don't think that you know, I don't think that means that we're less subjective or less fair. I feel like we're just as fair as everybody else, but we seem like people who are doing the stories.
As a writer, I know there are sometimes when I just have writer's block and, you know, you can't think of anything sort of inspirational. Have there been times when you just can't think of something that's
Yes.
worth talking about? And what do you do when you can't get over it, you know?
I mean, it's a really hard thing. Like, it's a really, like, I think there are a lot of people who want to do creative work, and it's hard to know what to do the work about. And then, like, part of figuring out how to make something is not just like, well, how do you edit something so it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and how do you, you know, like, how do you learn the craft of it? Like part of it is literally figuring out, like, how are you going to find something that you'd be willing to work on? And it's weird because, like, I think when you're taught how to do creative work, and nobody ever tells you, like, here's how to find an idea, and it's a huge problem. And you know, I think there are a couple ways to think about it. You know, like one is that you kind of like look in every direction and you sort of make it part of your job to actively kind of browse and look for stuff. It's like when I was working by myself, you know, I would just like it was sort of like I would set aside time, I would set aside money too that I was making, and just like with the thought of like, okay, I'm going to bookstores, I'm going to buy magazines, I'm going to like wander around, I'm just going to spend time like looking for a thought that is interesting enough to me that I want to look into it more. Then there's this game that you're taught as like a producer to play with because I worked on news shows for so long, where you go through the newspaper and you go through every story and you try to figure out some question that you could, like some little moment, like sometimes it would be one little thing in a news story, like when I first, and you try to make that the thing you look at. Like when I first moved to Chicago, there was weirdly this series of people getting hit by lightning.
Whoa.
And like normally in the course
Sounds like
of
Chicago.
you know,
Not just one.
Not just one. No, normally it's like a city the size of Chicago, like it'll be like one person a year. But for some reason, like there's some weird weather thing happening where it would get misty, and so people would still be outside. It wasn't raining, and then lightning would strike, and suddenly either 13 or 17 people got hit in a 1 month span. To the point where it was the month I had moved to the city, and there were like their tabloid papers literally had headlines that said how not to get hit by lightning. And I just felt like
Walk like this.
yeah, kind of like, yeah, exactly. No, I thought like, God, I've moved to a city of morons. Like the paper is publishing like how not to get hit by lightning, and in every story there would be like the normal boring stories that are in the paper, right? And the dude is like, whatever, person was hit by lightning, he was out on a golf course with his 3 friends, blah, blah, blah. And then in every story there would be like one quote, one interesting quote. And the quote would always be from the person who got hit, because almost all of them survived, and except for one. And the person would say, we're standing out on the golf course, and Mike turns to me and starts to say something, and then everything went white, and I heard this kind of like buzzing sound far away. And Mike is still talking to me, but I can't see, but it's like he's in slow motion, and I can't hear the words that are coming out of his mouth, and there's this buzzing sound, and then we're falling to the ground, but in slow motion, and I don't hear any sound at all. And like, it was just like, wow. And so I thought like that quote is so much more interesting than anything else in the paper. And I thought well, what I want to know, I want to know more about that. And so for the story that I wanted to do, I wanted to just basically talk to all of them about the moment that the lightning hit. And so it's like this exercise where just like you look through for the one little thing that just gets your blood going. I think it's hard to do any kind of work that's any good unless you're excited. I think a lot of us, when we're starting off making stuff, there's like the official way to write a poem, there's the official way to write a story, there's the official way to write a news story, and like we feel like we've got to sound like other people, and I think that generally like it's more important that you're excited about it than to actually do it the way that's supposedly the officially way.
Talking to teenagers in Chicago, you talk to a lot of different kids,
Yes.
and I'm assuming.
Yes.
And do you think popular kids or unpopular kids have more pressures on them?
I mean, my heart went out way more to the unpopular kids. Maybe just, I mean, I wasn't especially popular when I was in high school and junior high school, so I felt like I understood them immediately. And also, the stories tended to be more dramatic. It's you know, it's harder to do a story about somebody who's on top. You know, it's harder to do a story about a winner. Like, it's more interesting generally to find somebody who's sort of in the middle or near the bottom, and most of us can relate to them more.
Yeah.
There are advantages to being an outcast, also.
Do you think there are advantages to being an outcast?
Yeah, I actually think there are less pressure. I'm pretty solitary, and I see other people kind of constantly surrounded by friends, always having to sort of put on a show.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I feel like in the scale of it, I feel like I was more like you. Where like I always had like a little project going on of my own that was separate from other people, and I feel like that is exactly the adult that I turned into also.
Right.
Where like
More power to you.
kind of like where you know, I spend so much time just editing stuff and, you know, just like sitting at the computer and one thing and another. Like I feel like it's not that different from when I was in high school. For me, I've managed to recreate my high school experience in the adult world.
Oh, that's good, I think.
What can radio offer people that TV cannot?
Radio is really, really intimate. In a way that it's hard for TV to achieve. Like a really good TV show will have moments where you know, your heart goes out to the people and it's a good show. But it's rare and it's hard for them to pull off. Whereas on the radio, you know, if we just have somebody talking in a heartfelt way about anything, there's something about the emotion in the voice. Mostly I'm not on the radio. Like I'm on the radio for an hour a week, but for 60 hours a week, it's like a bunch of us who were sitting down here, like sort of, you know, talking about, well, no, if you move this sentence over here, but then you pause and then say this sentence, you know, like,
Right.
you know, it's all that.
Do you find that enjoyable? Find the editing, or
That's the most interesting part to me. I mean, I feel like I'm a very editing always came easily to me. Like everybody's got a part of a job that comes easily. For me, writing came really hard. Like if you guys are good writers, like it took me until I was 28 before I was like a competent writer in a way where you could listen to it and it didn't seem stupid. And whereas editing, it always came really easy. Unfortunately, I worked in a medium where I could just edit tape and have a job.
Wow.
But everything else came, performing on the radio. There are tapes that I play when I go around and give speeches of myself when I was 26 and 27. I've been in radio for 6, 7, 8 years, and I'm horrible. Like I'm literally horrible. Like I can't make people laugh. The other thing is like when you don't see the person, you don't write them off. Like when I used to do gang stories, I always thought that like it was a real advantage that the teenagers in the stories couldn't be seen by the audience. That the audience would see like a girl gang member, like black lipstick and look on her face, baggy clothes. They just think she's a punk. Whereas like she starts talking and she's really smart and funny, and you just like you don't have to like get around the way she looks to kind of like love her a little bit and imagine like, oh, that's what it would be to be like that. And in that way, like it's way easier. Like the intern on our show could get tape that's like really like every intern we have can get like tape that's really, really beautiful and moving. And it would be hard to do in print. Like you have to be a really, really skilled writer to pull it off and make that work. And it'd be really hard to do, I think, in video or film, just because there's so much about making something look in a way that have feeling to it. Whereas in radio, just like, you can sidestep it all. Fortunately, there's a bunch of places now. There's this website called transom.org. And all it's designed to do is to like say like, okay, here's how you do it. You want to do it? Here's how you do it. And they have like these old timers, like this guy Studs Terkel and Sarah Val, who's in Today's Show, and like all these Jonathan, who's in Today's Show. All these people who are sort of like old timers have done it like over and over, like chatting up Errol Morris, who's a great documentary filmmaker, chatting up people who are just beginning. It's like there's like nowhere like it actually. Saying like, yeah, here's the equipment you buy, here's the free software you can download, like here's what you do next. Yeah, it's really yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So, of all the things you could do in your life, why do you think radio is the most worthwhile? And if you couldn't do radio, what else would you be doing?
I mean, I'm not sure radio would be the most worthwhile, but like I stumbled into radio and was able. When I was 19, I talked my way into an internship at National Public Radio's headquarters in Washington. I had never heard of them, like most teenagers. I had never heard of public radio. I didn't like public radio especially. I didn't come from the kind of family that would have listened to public radio. But the people were really young and funny and smart, and they had these really cool studios, and I just thought like this would be a really fun thing to do. And so I was an intern there for free, and then the following summer got a job there for the summer, and just kind of like each year, like I was able to get one thing and then another and then another, and just so it just kind of like it wasn't a plan, and I'm not really sure how deeply worthwhile it is. Like, it got lucky.
Mm-hmm.
Well, most children live in a world where they're allowed to sort of be creative and come up with all sorts of things, but they seem to, a lot of kids lose that as they get older because of sort of self-consciousness, partially, I think. And what kept you going in creative mode? What allowed you to be creative?
Again, another question that I hope I can live up to. I mean, I just got lucky. Like, I just got like lucky. You know, and ended up in a situation where I was able to actually express myself. A lot of people who want to do creative work then never get that first job where somebody lets them do creative work, and when you do it, they say like, "Oh, do more, do more." Like, I got really, really lucky. I think it's a huge factor. And then, like, once I got a little bit of luck, I was very aggressive about trying to make the most of it. And then I think like most like, you know, like most creative people, like we work with all sorts of writers and like Chris, who did this artwork, like Chris Ware. Like, I feel like a lot of the people who I find that I'm closest to and who I find the most interesting, like they have so much of their kid self still alive in them. You know, like in today's show, David Sedaris, and you know, it's definitely Sarah, and you know, like everybody actually who's in the show. You know, like what you want is somebody who's like, you know, partly adult and responsible, you know, and like partly like a kid goofing around. Like when you haven't seen the show, but when you see Eric play, like he's totally like, it's just like it's like he's like goofing around. He's like totally goofing around on stage in this way where you're like, you know, this is a retired man. You know, you know what I mean? Like he's totally like kept everything about himself alive, and like he didn't have like, you know, just through sheer force of like, he just thought it would be fun, you know. He wanted to play it.
Well, that's encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah.